we decided we wanted to kind of highlight some of the new capabilities that we've introduced into ProModel, MedModel, and Process Simulator in this webinar. I'm going to start with Process Simulator. We have an Autodesk edition uh, as well as ProModel Autodesk edition. There are some new Process Simulator capabilities. There's some system functions that we've added. Uh, uh, Ribbon properties and enhancements. We are adding path networks. Another thing that should be available in February will be conveyors. And so we're going to cover that in Process Simulator, and then in ProModel I'm going to go over what we did with entity spots, background graphics scaling, some system functions, and enhancements with those, as well as macro enhancements. And then I have a couple of miscellaneous enhancements to both ProModel, MedModel, and Process Simulator that I want to cover with you. So I have a quick question that I wanted to do a poll with you guys. Does anybody in your organization use or plan to use AutoCAD or Inventor? So any of the Autodesk software. So I'll give you guys a second to do the poll. All right. Okay. So it looks like everybody's completed it. So I'm going to go ahead and close, and I'll share this. So it looks like 82% of the attendees are using or know people in your organization that uses Autodesk products. All right, so this is Process Simulator, the Autodesk edition. You will see if you have the Autodesk edition installed, it should say Autodesk edition in your Getting Started panel. So what the Autodesk edition comes with that the ProModel Professional does not is we have this new stencil. It's called an asset browser, which is access to Autodesk's factory design utility. It's their factory assets, which Autodesk has provided. It's a whole bunch of different objects. It could be tables, people, AGVs, cranes, really anything that you would typically have seen with Visio shapes. Let me go ahead and I'll turn off the asset browser. You can do that here in the ribbon. We've added a section in the ribbon so you can disable the asset browser by clicking on that. You can turn on the Visio shapes. So they're very similar to what the Visio shapes are, but you can create your own, and they can store different properties that could be used by default in your simulation. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag an adjustable height table. Maybe I wanted to search for a AGV. And this downloads them from Autodesk, and we'll drag these out. Once the graphic shows up over here, then I can drag it out. And I could build a simulation model using these. So I could have the standard AGV. It could be a location, an activity, an entity, any of those it could be used for. And that's in addition to just the default shapes that, or the default assets that you can get from Autodesk, you can also create your own user assets, which are stored locally on your machine. So you could create your own factory design utility assets, and you could store them in the cloud, which we have a cloud option. We also have access to Autodesk's factory design utility Vault. So we support Vault 2019 and 2020. Depends upon what you have installed. You should be able to access that as well. But once you start using assets, so I have a model that I wanted to show you. These can all be synced to Inventor or to AutoCAD. It requires that you're using AutoCAD manufacturing or AutoCAD mechanical or AutoCAD architecture. That can be 2019 or 2020. And the same with Inventor. It has to be 2019 or 2020. Once you've built a model and you've saved it, you can, if you have Inventor or AutoCAD open, you can select Sync to AutoCAD or Sync to Inventor. I'm going to go ahead and show you Inventor because the nice thing about Inventor is the things that you're building are going to be in 3D. Looks a little bit nicer. In AutoCAD, you can create 3D, but it will import your factory design assets that you had in Process Simulator in the dimension that the tool AutoCAD or Inventor was designed for. If you notice, it told me that it's synced. So now I've got all of my factory assets inside of Inventor. I can do the same thing with AutoCAD. I'm not going to show you that because it's just a rinse and repeat, but it puts these in and I can then move them anywhere that I want. The nice thing about this is you can start simulating inside a process simulator and also in ProModel using factory assets and push those back into your drawing that has your layout so that they're placed correctly within the layout. So right now, we do not go back and forth. It's a one-way directional pull. You also, inside of Process Simulator and ProModel, you can export a file, and that will create a file that contains all of these assets, which can then be opened up and you can sync within AutoCAD or Inventor. And we have a couple of icons here in the cross-product workflow section for factory. So that is how the Process Simulator Autodesk Edition functions. If you notice, I have just a generic circle here called bar stock, and I have a generic circle called rejects, and those are entities. If you notice, where in the world did this guy come from? That is that's this reject entity that I have here in my process simulator model. Because it's a generic shape, when I go into properties, since this is not an asset from the factory design utility, what we do, if you use any of the shapes that come with Visio, like these guys up here, the activity, the buffer, the entity, the resource, storage, or anything that you have in your stencil, your process simulator professional stencil, if you use any of those, it imports as a generic shape, almost like a placeholder that you could then go in and change at a later point in time. Or, like my bar stock, I didn't want that. Now in properties, you can hit the drop down for advanced, and you can say if you want the asset to be exported or not. So my bar stock, I did not have checked, but my rejects, because it was checked, when I come back into Inventor, that's why I have this box. And it has transferred my properties to it. So, all right. So the next thing I wanted to show you was ProModel Autodesk Edition. So you will know that you have the Autodesk edition of ProModel when you go to the Getting Started. It will tell you that it's the Autodesk edition right here. Similarly, you can also go in both ProModel and Process Simulator. You can go to the Help About in Process Simulator, or in ProModel you can go to the About, and it will list the type of license that you have. And right now I have ProModel, I have the Autodesk edition. And I will come back to this screen in just a little bit. I've done a few different things that I think that you guys may be excited about, but I want to come back and we'll cover that. So in the Autodesk edition of ProModel, we have the Add Assets to Library button here in the ribbon, and like you saw in Process Simulator, we have the Sync Workflow. Now, the thing that's different about ProModel versus Process Simulator, in Process Simulator, when you go to build a simulation, everything is being built from the UI. So you're dragging and dropping, just like you would in the professional version of Process Simulator. You're just dragging and dropping shapes, and when we go and simulate, we convert those shapes into entities, into resources, into activities that then are displayed during simulation. We build the simulation on the fly. And in ProModel, those elements already have to exist. The graphics that we have already have to exist before you even start simulating. So we've added, inside of ProModel, we've added this button, Add Assets to Library. So as I click on that, it opens up my factory design assets table right here, where I can then go and find, if you remember, I showed you that adjustable height work table, and I can add this over into the right-hand side by either double-clicking or selecting an arrow. I could add my cafeteria chair. I could add a conference room chair and a conference table. Maybe I don't want the chair, so I could just double-click on the right-hand side and get rid of that. Can add a couple more. Go and find man, do a search for several different things. And now all of these assets, these factory design assets that have the properties necessary to display them properly in AutoCAD or Inventor, they're all now, when I click OK, if you remember, let's see, manual, small, swagger. That is going to be the last entity, or the last asset that I add into my graphic library. When I click OK, now if I go into locations, you can see that I have them right here. They're all added. Now and the other thing that's a little bit different with the Autodesk version is all of the default graphics that you'll have in your default graphic library will be assets. They will be Autodesk assets. So just by default, when I drag something out, it will have the asset properties assigned to it. And we can build a model just like we did in Process Simulator, and that can be synced into AutoCAD or Inventor. So I'm just going to add some of these shapes out. So here's my manual small swagger. So I'll just add these out. You know, there's no process that is being defined, but all these shapes are out there. So if I hit save and let's do 12, 19. If I save that, I then can come to sync workflow and I can go to AutoCAD and I can sync those assets back into my AutoCAD layout. You can see there's my man, there's my sphere. All right. So I wanted to be able to interact a lot more with AutoCAD with this addition of ProModel. So one of the things that we really wanted to make sure that we were able to do was be able to scale my background and be able to import an AutoCAD drawing. So this is something that I made available to all ProModel users. If you select Insert, you now have the ability to go and scale your background graphic. For right now, the only images that you can do are bitmap, JPEG, GIF, PNG, TIFF, icon, PCX, and now, which did not exist earlier, was DWG. And I can, let's see if I have a good version that we can use. So as long as you have the AutoCAD mechanical or AutoCAD architecture, you should be able to import a DWG file. So the only one that I have access to right now is going to be that one that I just brought in from here. But if you notice, here's my drawing from AutoCAD. I can select place markers, and I could say between this guy right here all the way down to the end over here. I could place that marker. I could say that is going to be 100 feet. You still have to know what distance you're looking at, and I could zoom in or out if I wanted. But as long as I know the distance from point A to point B, I then can say, well, how many grid units do I want to be within that, that marker that I just placed? I could say I want 25. If I click OK, it will bring it in, and I can view my grid, and now I should have 25 grid units between here and, oops, the edge of that drawing. Let me go ahead and hit zoom to fit layout. So between this right here all the way to here is going to be 25. And if the image doesn't quite fit the 25 for where you place that marker, we will rescale and we will adjust the image so that it will fit within the grid units that you specified. So that is available to anybody with or without the Autodesk edition. All right. So I have a poll question. Has anybody used the auto scaling in ProModel so far, because this was available about a month or so ago. So if you have Service Pack 3, this is available to you. All right, I'll leave the poll open for just a second longer. And I'm going to go ahead and close it. And I will share that. So it looks like nobody's used this yet. I would strongly encourage you to do so. If you're starting a new simulation, I would definitely take advantage of it. The only thing that we do not support right now is vector-based graphics. So any raster base, including your DWG, which will require those two versions of AutoCAD to be on your machine. Right now, you can import any raster-based graphic. All right, let me go ahead and minimize. And I want to go back into Process Simulator. So what I wanted to cover with you guys is kind of the art of the possible right now. What I'm about to show you are some new features that we're adding to Process Simulator, and they are about 99% complete, at least this current feature, and that is path networks within Process Simulator. So path networks inside of Process Simulator, that is a new concept that was requested by Autodesk. So we've added that in, and I think that it will give everybody a lot more capability within Process Simulator. This is a feature that is available through subscription that is added to the traditional Process Simulator Professional. So what I have right here is a model that I've built with a path network. This little rectangle, my mouse is very finicky today, is my path network. And it looks very similar to what you may have seen within ProModel, but I have nodes, which I have properties for. I have segments. So the nodes are where the resource can stop, make a decision to go left or right, or to interact with an activity. I have segments. The segments are, or a path connector. That is how we get from node to node. And there are properties assigned to that as well. So we have distance, we have direction that can be given to that path network connector. It can be a one-way or a two-way. Two-way means I can go either direction. If I switch it to one-way, then if you notice there's a little arrow right there, it's pointing, this is the direction that I go. And if I don't like that, I wanted to flip it, well, we've added a flip direction button. So now this segment on my path network goes the opposite direction. I'm going to put it back at two-way. And we also have, for path networks, we have interfaces. And that just says when a resource needs to be at the lathe, this is the node that it's going to stand on to interact with the lathe. Now, if you wanted to add a path network, you then have to put your resources on that path network. let me go ahead. It looks like this model is having an issue. So let me just build a quick one for you guys. I think that that would be a lot easier anyways. So let's hit New, Process Simulator. I'm going to go ahead and close this demo that I had. And I'm going to use some system assets. Put a table out here. Go to a couple of different activities. And I'm going to grab a man. There he is. And there's a woman. I'll have my entity come in. Just go ahead and connect everything together. All right, so I've built a very basic model. I'm going to come in, open up the properties, and I'm going to use the man and the woman. Let's make those resources. All right, so I'm using the man here and here. I'm going to use the woman here and here. I then am going to come into my model elements, select more elements, and now with Path Networks, with the subscription of Path Networks, you'll have this option, which opens up a table across the bottom. You can then select Add, creates a path network that's a passing, which means your resources can have a different speed, and they can, if one is slower than the other, it can pass it or be passed. So now that I have a path network, this button right here indicates that I am in drawing mode. If I check it, now I'm not in drawing mode, but by default, when you create a path network, you are always in drawing mode. I'm going to zoom in just so that it's a little bit easier for you to see. And to start drawing a path network, you will left click and that will create a node. And if you left click again, it will create another node with a segment connecting the two. So I'm going to just continue to do that. And don't mind my routing arrows. And when I want to go back to the node that I started with, I can right click on it and it will connect. If I have a node, if I want to select a node, I will left click and it selects a node. If I want to interface with an activity, I select a node by left clicking and then I will right click on the activity. And if you notice, it draws a dotted line. That indicates that that is an interface. If I select it, it says in properties it's an interface. Another kind of neat thing, I can right click here, or I'll left click and then I'll right click right down here and I'll connect. So now I can go from here to here. I also could left click and select this node and click on this one by right clicking, and that will draw a segment to go from here to here. Well, what if I wanted to have a node right there in the center? Well, Make sure nothing is selected, and then you can right-click on the screen, and that will add another path node. I can then drag that node down and split a path. Right now, it's only connected to the one segment, but if I grab it again and put it on top of this other segment, if you notice, it puts a green box on each side of that path segment. And then if I, try that one more time. If I do that, now everything is connected. I thought this was really cool. This is taking advantage of the connectivity within Visio to create our path network. So the last thing I need to do for my path network to be completed is I need to interface with all of my activities. I'm not sure if that worked. Let's see. Okay. There we go. All right, so I have all of my activities are interfaced. The last thing, now that the path network is created, I need to come over to my resources, and if you notice, you will now have a section for your resource to have them be on a path network. Here, you can assign them to a path network, give them a home node if you want for them to return home if they're idle. I'm going to put them both on node 9. All right. And now, if I simulate, you should see your resources moving from activity to activity. Okay, so I'm just going to stop that. So now we are able to track material handling on path networks. The one thing I did want to point out, if you notice when I select these segments or these connectors, there is a distance, and that distance is auto fit. If I move this guy over, it auto recalculates that distance. The way that that is done is by the scale of your document. So I can go to design, I can go to size, you can do more page size. You could also come down here to page, you can right click and you can go to page setup, and it will take you to the same place where you can select drawing scale, and you can change your scale here. In the previous versions, what you have installed right now, there will not be a scale assigned to your document, but we base the scaling off of the page setup. So if you have your page setup scaled, you can then have your path networks be scaled. All right, so I mentioned, so that's our path networks. I mentioned material handling. I have a phase 2. This is all going to be available towards the middle of February. Phase 2, which I don't have something demoable for you right now, is going to be conveyors. We've added the path networks. It's, like I said, 98% done, fully tested. And the next thing we're introducing are conveyors, which should be pretty cool to have inside a process simulator. We'll also have onboard stations on the conveyors, something that you do not have in ProModel. So I'm hoping that by the end of January that we'll be able to have another demo and be able to, or another webinar and be able to demo that to you. So I mentioned that this is a subscription, and one of the things I wanted to show you all here in the Autodesk version, which is a subscription version of Process Simulator. And also the material handling features are only available in a subscription version of Process Simulator. I can go to Help, About, and I showed you this in ProModel as well. There is a logout and a checkout. Logout and checkout for Process Simulator as well. So we have developed a new licensing technology. So it will be phased in to the software here in the next couple of months. It's intended to replace network licenses and serial numbers. This is kind of my miscellaneous, this guy right here, things that I wanted to go over with you. I want to cover this, and then I'm going to circle back here to a couple of additional things within ProModel. But I think this is, since we're talking about the new features within Process Simulator that are to come, I wanted to cover that first. So I can log out of my software, and of course something went wrong. So, all right, I'm out of this, but if you notice, my ribbon is grayed out and I have a login button. So if I select login, this will pop up a login screen. So if this was not my account already, and this is what you'll see to start with. If you haven't already created an account, you'll instead of selecting login, you'll say sign up, and you'll enter in your email address, create a password, click sign up. It will check to see if there is a license available that is assigned to your email address, and it will create an account for you. Once that's done, you'll be able to log in with your email address. We have something new called an account portal, which will allow you to manage your licenses. So the nice thing about this new tech, when you're not on the demo server, is you're able to install the software anywhere. You can put it on any machine, and based off of what you're entitled to, based off of your license, you can log in and you'll have access to the software that you've purchased. So you no longer have to worry about resetting a serial number. If you had a network license, there's no need for a hardware key to be plugged into a server. You don't have to install any additional software. You just username and password, kind of how Office 365 works. So if you have access to a machine, you have access, and the software is installed, you have access to that software. It also gives the IT admin or a power user access to manage the licenses that you have on your system. So I am logging in to something called our account portal. For you. So let me sign in. This is what I'm showing you right now. This is my customer account portal. So this is something that an account admin could have access to. I am the account admin for this. This might look like. So I have, for my account, I have 3 different products that have been assigned. I've got a product called PMPCS Test. It has 100 seats, so this might be like a lab or a site license. So I know that there's a few people on that have site licenses. You could, since I have 100 seats, I could add extra users. So I could add myself and this other user, this PME user 2. So those are the only ones I have assigned right now. So I can add them, and now they have access to, when they log in with their email address and their password, they will have access to this software. I can come here. Here's a Process Simulator Autodesk Edition license. And I've got 3 users that are already assigned, myself, PME user 2, and PM test. Well, what if I don't want all 3 of those to have it? Well, if I really don't need a license, well, I can unassign it. I still have access to it because I'm the admin, but I don't have to have access to that license. Same with this ProModel Autodesk Edition. This is just a single named license, so I can see who has it. Also, I can check and see who's currently using the software right now. So right now, nobody is using it through this testing account that I'm demoing to you. But you'd be able to see any of your licenses there. So this is very nice. It takes the place of the need for a network license. It allows you to have more insight on who is assigned a license at your company and who's currently using it. So it gives you control. You'd be able to assign people or unassign them to a license. We did make some changes to entity spots. If you notice, in the version of, if you don't have the latest version installed, entity spots sometimes could be very, very large. They could be very small. But because of the scaling that we did, we changed it so that they will stay the same pixel size as you zoom in and out. So if you notice, I'm zoomed pretty far in. But if I wanted to zoom out, there's 100%. Let's do zoom to fit layout. Oh, 75. So they even they'll get a little bit smaller based off of how you're zoomed in, but they will never get bigger than, I believe, about 7 or 8 pixels. So that will help with scaling. Another thing that I wanted to make sure that we covered was in arrays, you now have the ability to use macros to define your field, your different fields. So the file, the sheet, and the start cell, those can all be different. You could use a macro, Mac1, Mac2, Mac3, which will allow you to experiment with different sheet names, different file names, and a different starting cell. So you can do all of that now in the Scenario Manager if you use these sheet names here. These macros within the array import.
Aaron, thank you very much, and thanks to everybody who joined today and those who hung on a little bit extra time here. As I mentioned, you will get an email tomorrow with a link to the recording and a couple of slides, and we'll put the links to the trial or the evaluation versions of the Autodesk editions that Aaron mentioned as well, so you can get right to the Autodesk App Store. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a great holiday, and we'll see you next time.